Hey, welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Alex and Isaac.
And I'm Mike Quincy.
And this week we are talking about a luxurious hybrid SUV that is a sort of a fan favorite, very popular, and it's been redesigned for 2023. It is the 2023 Lexus RX 350h, which we just added to our test fleet of vehicles that we just purchased to test, and we spent a little time in it. Mike Quincy, tell us a little bit. What's the rundown for those who have never heard of the Lexus RX? Tell us somehow over the past 20 some odd years. Tell us what is this car? Where does it fit, and how's it a little different?
Well, I'm guessing that if you're a car fan, you're listening or watching this podcast, so you probably are a car person. But anyway, that being said, this is the 5th generation RX, which was among the first luxury SUVs when it arrived in 1998. It's a really important car for Lexus. You mentioned how popular it was. It sells in big numbers for this company, and it competes with some of the best out there: the Audi Q7, the BMW X5, the Genesis GV80, among others. But the big news is that this year it's no longer offered with a V6 engine, which was always super silky smooth, one of the SUV's best features. Instead, this RX gets a gets all 4-cylinder powertrains that uses either turbocharging or hybridization, or employ both technologies actually. And a plug-in hybrid is supposedly in the works. It's going to be arriving at a later date. It's going to be the new RX is about 2 inches longer than the previous generation in terms of measuring the wheelbase. It should result in more room for rear passengers. Our Premium Plus model has the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder hybrid engine hooked up to a continuously variable transmission, produces 246 horsepower. And the numbers that most people are interested in when it comes to hybrids is the EPA is estimating that this combination will deliver around 37 miles per gallon in the city and 34 miles per gallon on the highway. Another big change compared to the previous model is that the RX now uses a touch screen instead of the old touch pad, which we all hated for the infotainment system.
Lexus learned that is slowly disappearing from their lineup. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's the first of the good news for the new RX, and we equipped our all-wheel drive model with a whole bunch of options, including 21-inch wheels, head-up display, which we'll get to later. A few other odds and ends, and the grand total came to $59,955. Not exactly chump change, but hey, it does compete with some of the more luxurious models out there.
Yeah, and we also purchased a non-hybrid as well, and we'll also be doing our own fuel economy tests. So we'll get to put those sort of numbers to the test. Now, I spent a little time in it. I swear that backseat is larger, just based on my memory. I could move in there. But Alex, you spent a lot more time with it than I did. What's it like to drive? How does it compare to the non-hybrid version? What's going on there?
Yeah, so frequent listeners of the podcast have probably heard me talk about stuff like this before, but what I love about the RX and similar vehicles is that it's a very comfortable driving experience, and that's what it's set out to do, and it's not trying to be sporty in any kind of way. And I think you have to be somebody who values comfort over a sporty driving experience to, find the value in something like this. But for me personally, I like to see a vehicle that kind of sets out that type of mission and sticks to it, whether it's sporty or comfortable. It sticks to that and doesn't try to do absolutely everything. So yeah, in the end, the RX is, still a very comfortable, luxurious ride. It's smooth, it's quiet, it's doing all of those things that you would expect of a luxury vehicle. And, we've kind of experienced 3 different flavors of this RX at this point. We rented a 500h, which is kind of a more powerful turbocharged hybrid version, kind of a little silly in some ways, in my opinion. We also have a regular non-hybrid 350, and then this 350h. And in my opinion, this is the way to go. As Quincy said, all of the RXs are now based on 4-cylinder powertrains, whether you get the hybrid or not. So since there's no V6 to choose from, it's kind of a no-brainer for me to choose the hybrid. And in terms of driving it, I just think that the ECVT and the electric motors just kind of supplement that low-end power perfectly. You just take off smoothly from a stop. You're not messing around with start-stop systems because it's a hybrid. it all works very effortlessly and it's very smooth. Now, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because of this new 4-cylinder engine. It does have kind of typical 4-cylinder engine traits, and paired with a CVT, what I mean is that when you really have to lean into it and get into the power, the revs are going to raise up really high. They're going to kind of hang there at the higher RPM level.
Yeah, I
and then
that.
and it's right. You hear it, and it's a little kind of gritty. It loses some of that silkiness of the V6. But yeah, like we said, there's no V6 to choose from anymore. So I'd rather have the 4-cylinder paired with the electric motors and the efficiency and smoothness that comes along with it, rather than, I guess, the turbocharged 4-cylinder, which kind of still has some of those traits anyway. So yeah, I was really happy with this vehicle, and I think it drives well. It's not necessarily. Yeah, go ahead.
Alex, you mentioned, efficiency, and I was just going to jump in and say I love the 500 plus mile cruising range. Fill it up with fuel. I mean, listen, it's premium fuel, which is too bad. But that to me is the beauty of hybrids that focus on fuel efficiency as opposed to just adding extra power. The cruising range for me, as people know, I'm a big road trip guy, and that really was the calling card for me, combined with the nice ride and the quiet interior. And I also fit really well in the seats. So this is a really nice road trip.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's satisfying to drive it around for like a week and see the fuel gauge only drop down like one little tick at over like multiple days of driving. Now, one thing I will say is just in terms of the driving experience, going back to the whole comfort, luxurious thing, is if you are expecting this engaging driving experience, you might want to pick something that's maybe rear wheel drive based, like the X5 you talked about, Quincy, or even the Q7. The vehicle, it does respond well. It drives and handles perfectly fine. It does kind of have that front wheel drive feel. And what I mean by that is its reactions are a little slower. It's a little more mundane through the turns, that type of thing. Not a problem at all, in my opinion, for what the vehicle's trying to be. But if you are looking for that more engaging type of experience, maybe something else would be a better option.
I really like what you said about where this is that sweet spot, because this is a road trip car. Not everything has to give you goosebumps when you drive it. Sometimes the world is exciting enough as it is. Sometimes you just want a car that is comfortable, and especially with a car this size, you've got someone screaming in the back, you've got a dog, you've got whatever. It's just, at least your car is going to be just a nice, comfortable place at the end of a long workday to get into it. And I agree, totally. That 500, the kind of sporting pretensions there, save your money. Yeah, totally. Right. And Quince, you mentioned a couple other things you might want to save your money on too, because it seems like the more you add onto this car, kind of some goofiness shows up. Shenanigans.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to drive it up to Vermont and back, so spent about 10 hours in this car, put miles on it, enjoying the scenery. But one of the things that absolutely drove me bananas about this car, and not in a good way, is the optional head-up display, which I usually like in test cars. But the one in this RX is simply awful because it requires you to look up on the display on the inside of the windshield to see what you're doing when you're using the steering wheel controls.
Right.
So on the right side is where you're adjusting your cruise control settings. On the left side is usually your audio settings. But when I was driving this car, it was a bright sunny day. So I'm wearing sunglasses. Can't really see the head-up display. Right. And again, the controls on the steering wheel are unlabeled.
Yes.
So
blank.
So you can't. You're just seeing arrows going up or down or left or right. And I get that you own this car, you live with it every day, you will probably get used to it. But the fact is that the logic of this system is so ridiculous because if let's say you're listening to a Spotify playlist and you want to skip to the next song. So you have to first engage the button on the left side of the steering wheel, which kind of brings up the head-up display for your playlist. And then you have to hit the button again to move it on to the next track, which is like, one button punch too many. This to me is steps backwards. It's almost like, Lexus is saying, hey, let's look at the really dumb controls that we find on newer Mercedes Benzes and copy them.
Well, it's funny because this is a Toyota thing, because they used to have something very similar on the Prius a couple of generations ago, like 2016 or so. They had, but those were labeled, and also those controls only did one thing. It was a volume control. It was cruise control up or down. But these were their multifunction controls and unlabeled buttons. That's not something you want to get into while you're driving. Right. But the good news, it's optional, right?
It is optional.
Yes. Yeah. And credit to Alex, in our pre-production meeting, pointed out, you don't, in my stupid mind, I thought, well, everyone has to deal with this. No, it is optional. Consumer Reports advice right off the top of my head is like, do not get the head-up display. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense if you're driving anywhere. Again, with your sunglasses on, you can't see the stuff that you're trying to manipulate. And another thing that we've pinged about other Lexus models in the past is the interior door latches, or this little electronic button that are ingrained into the side armrests.
It's like the NX has the same thing.
Yeah, so here's the acid test. You bring in somebody, you're driving somewhere, they're your passenger in the front seat, and you see what they do the first time they try to get out of this car.
I've explained it multiple times.
It's not intuitive at all, and I don't get it. It's like, oh, we can do this. This is cool. Let's just make it this way. Whether it makes any logical sense at all, it's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't help. And that one is not optional. No matter what RX you get, you're dealing with that. So, the steering wheel control thing is difficult to wrap my head around. I mean, I could go on multiple reasons and other issues that I have, but I will throw two out there. When you're turning the steering wheel, because they're touch sensitive, right? You just have to like brush against them all the time. You're turning the steering wheel, and boom, it pops up in the head-up display when you're not looking for it. Total distraction. You're like, ooh, what is that? And then the other thing, to your point about wearing the sunglasses, you can go into the system, you can shut the HUD off, but the problem with that is that now it's showing you what each button does in the gauge cluster, which sounds okay, but when it pops up, it covers like important information in the gauge cluster with this big thing that pops up to explain what the buttons do.
You know how fast you're going? No, I have no idea. But John Candy. You gotta...
I don't know. There is one positive that I found, and it's a very small positive, is that you can customize the buttons. You can go in there, and I don't know that anybody ever would do this, but can go into the system. You can put different things on the buttons. You can't like get rid of cruise control necessarily, but you can customize some of the media buttons. So maybe somebody would find that helpful, but I don't think that's worth everything else that comes along with it.
Right, but they're still unlabeled. In other words, you can't customize that.
No, you can't. And it makes you look in two different places. I found myself, even though they're touch sensitive, you can theoretically just kind of move your fingers to it and bring up the thing. No matter how long I drove the car, I still found that first I'm going to look to make sure my thumb is hitting the pad, and then I'm going to bring my attention to the heads up display. So you're just bouncing your focus back and forth, and it's just not necessary.
Quincy, if you bought this car, I can see you out there with a label maker, with your label baby junior, just sticking, this is the button for volume. This is the, you ever get in a car that someone's put like little notes and
here's open
the door. Here's how to do this. Yeah.
I know super producer Dave Abrams will laugh about this, but when Alex was talking about accidentally, engaging it while you're turning the wheel, or you can customize it, like, I'm going to go out there with some white out and like, this is the cruise control button.
Yeah, there you go.
You kind of like, that's crazy old man talk, right?
Yeah. Well, we're all kind of on that spectrum at some point. I had a little gripe myself, and that was, this has a driver monitoring system, and it has a really interesting adaptive cruise control setup, which we'll talk about in a second. But I noticed the way I drive, maybe this is bad posture, but sometimes I'll drive on the highway, I'll sort of have that, and where the driver with my flannel shirt, where the driver monitoring camera is on this car, my arm would sometimes block it for long enough and that it would say, hey, you blocked the camera. And that's actually a good thing. We don't want a system that can allow you to automate systems in the car and not pay attention. But Alex, can you tell us a little? I didn't get to try out it has a really interesting adaptive cruise control and stuff. You spent way more time with it than I did, right?
Yeah, it does have this thing called PDA, Proactive Driving Assist, and we're seeing it on some other Lexus models and even some Toyotas now that are coming through. And basically what that's trying to do is use the radar system at the front of the car to almost act like adaptive cruise control, but you're not setting a speed. So if you're just driving on normal surface streets and you come up behind a vehicle, you're going faster, it'll apply a little bit of brake pressure, or in the instance of a hybrid or an EV, it'll try to use regen when it can, to kind of slow the car down.
So can I get this installed on the cars that are tailgating me retroactively?
You would
when
hope,
I'm going
yeah.
the speed limit in my RX because it's so relaxed that I'm just sitting there cruising. It's,
right. With how many Toyotas are sold, maybe it'll proliferate. But I don't know. That it works well in some situations, but then it's also trying to do the same thing automatically, like when you're going down a hill apply some brake to maintain speed. Or I even noticed it coming on when the road got kind of twisty. And it started to bother me because not that I was driving super fast, but I was already planning to slow the vehicle down for the twisty road myself. And then it grabs the brakes, I grab the brake, and it made it not smooth. So that was my problem there. Is neat idea, but I felt like I could drive smoother than it was, allowing me to with the system active.
And I thought, with that kind of regen braking, my experience was that, this is what EVs do, the kind of the 1 foot driving thing, which is it's certainly not the case with our RX hybrid. But yeah, Alex, I noticed the same thing. And I thought, wow, this is a very active system here. But with the driver monitoring thing, it will kind of shout at you if it doesn't think that your eyes are facing forward. Right. And as I'm driving through, beautiful Vermont, listen, I'm looking around, I'm looking at the scenery, I'm looking at the mountains. I admit it, but it wasn't like I was driving for 5 minutes doing this. I mean, it was just a quick glance, like, keep your eyes on the road. And it got so intrusive to me, and I get the intention of it. The intention is good. It's not a bad thing. But I had to go into the settings and turn it off because it was driving me crazy. Because there were times that I was looking straight forward. It's like, you're not paying attention. I'm like, I am paying attention.
No, we're going to test this fully. This is just our initial impressions.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
This is something that Kelly and you and Alex are going to take a look at.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that it worked okay for me. I didn't really get too many false warnings. I felt like it really only came on when I was truly messing with the infotainment system, or I remember one instance, something slid out of the storage cubby into the floor, whatever, and I went to go grab it, and so I leaned down, and those situations are where it actually, went off for me. I felt like when I was just kind of scanning the road, looking to the sides, it was okay. Now, one thing I will say, anybody who is going to get this car or interested in this car, and they end up buying one with the camera system, go into the settings, because I noticed that by default, ours had the camera recording option turned on. Like that's how it was delivered. No idea why you would ever want this, or, you can extrapolate and think of why Lexus might want this. But it was enabled. There's no explanation as to really where that information is going or how it's being stored. So you can turn off the recording feature, but still take advantage of the warnings in the system itself. So I would go in there and flick that off.
Absolutely.
I was really shocked to see that on. Let alone it's an option at all, but to see it on from default.
Alex, when you were starting to talk about this, I thought you were going to also give the advice, if you're going to buy one of these cars, take a lot of time with the dealer, your salesperson, and get a big explanation for how all this stuff works, how to get into the settings, stuff that you don't like, how can you change it, how can you modify it. There's so many options. So maybe there's even too many options to customize this car in the way you want to, but they're not all intuitive on how to get to the settings and make the adjustments.
Yeah, especially if you're an existing Lexus or even RX driver, like this whole infotainment system and the usability inside, it's all completely different. So you're going to want to spend time to learn it and understand what everything does.
But but there's some real good things about this car. One awesome thing that I love that Lexus has been doing is that their hybrids are like almost the same price. In some cases, they're cheaper. In some cases, they're. It seems like even if gas prices drop a ton. We haven't done our full official fuel economy testing, but It seems like that the pricing on this, Alex, what is it? It's just like a little bit different from the regular car, similarly equipped, right?
Well, similarly equipped, they're actually exactly the same. So if you get an RX 350h, just the lowest priced hybrid version, which comes standard with all-wheel drive, that costs $50,150 is the MSRP.
Which sounds like the version to get.
Yeah, and you're right, because you might get bail from those steering wheel controls. And then the RX 350 Turbo, so the non-hybrid version, with all-wheel drive is the exact same price. So there's no payback period for going with the hybrid. You're just going to instantly start getting better fuel economy, saving money right away. The EPA ratings are 24 combined for the RX 350 all-wheel drive and 36 combined for the hybrid. So it's a huge difference. Like you said, Keith, we haven't done our own testing yet, so those are just EPA numbers.
But this is another case where why would someone not buy the hybrid? This is, I get it. It used to be, and I owned hybrids starting in the early 2000s, and I remember they would have these, the handoffs from the gas to electric, and would feel like someone was giving you, a jolt in the back. And
so slick now.
And now it's, hybrids today aren't hybrids 5 years ago.
No.
These are better. In almost every case, I feel like you could go back to episodes over and over. The Santa Fe, the Tucson, this car now saying, why wouldn't you buy the hybrid?
Yeah, totally. Couldn't agree with you more. And you're right about the evolution of hybrids. In the earliest stages of hybrids, in theory, you could kind of coast along when the road is sort of flat on electric only. But it didn't take much, just a little throttle pressure before the engine would kick in. Right. But today's hybrids are much more stout. They're more robust when it comes to staying in the electric power a little bit longer, and even cruising down the highway, it can kind of putz along on electric power only. So the hybrids are definitely getting better, and the fuel economy so far that we were seeing for like all of the hybrids that we've tested. When it is based on fuel economy as opposed to power, but again, hybrids today are better than they've ever been.
Yeah. Yeah, and Keith, just to, I guess, answer your question thoroughly as far as why somebody wouldn't buy this one, there is a cheaper RX, right? You can get a 350 front-wheel drive version. So if, no all-wheel drive, you can't do that with the hybrid. You got to get the all-wheel drive. But that one is about $1,600 less. So doing the math on that, it would, with today's gas prices in Connecticut anyway, results may vary, but 2.5 years roughly to pay off that difference, which still not terribly long, especially considering how long people tend to keep cars these days. And the only other thing is it is down a little bit on power compared to those turbo models, right? You do lose a little bit of horsepower. Didn't bother me at all, especially considering kind of the luxuriness and the kind of, you're not really driving this thing too, quickly or anything like that. So that didn't bother me. It felt like enough. But if you do feel like you want more power or a more traditional transmission, if the CVT bothers you, maybe you would choose the turbo model. But other than that, yeah, no brainer.
Well, we'll have full numbers after we do all our instrumented tests, and after we get this up to miles. We have to put break-in miles on all our cars. I don't think there's going to be a problem getting people to put miles on this car. I suspect this is going to be one of those cars that's like signed out for a week. Gone to Florida, gone to someone goes on vacation, and you're fighting over this particular car. I imagine. Well, if you have questions for us, you can send them to talkingcars@icloud.com, and video questions too. And you can just send a regular question too, which is exactly what Ajo did. And Ajo asks us a question that, we talk about a lot. With cars becoming increasingly like computers and requiring software updates, is it out of line to ask your dealer to check for software updates when bringing a vehicle in for service? Quick answer: no, not at all. Great idea. Really do that. I'm sure there are many different systems that get updates, but most of the time dealers act like you're crazy for asking. Is it out of line to ask them just to check? Alex, I kind of see you shaking your head there.
Yeah, definitely not out of line. I mean, that's one of the advantages of going to the dealer. And I'm sorry to hear that you're having difficulty. I would maybe even consider going to a different dealer perhaps to find somebody more
computers.
This is the norm as you realize. So I think maybe finding a different dealer that's able to work with you a little bit better, because there are software updates that, only the dealer can perform. We're seeing a lot of cars, and you'll hear about it in articles, and, we talk about it too, over-the-air updates, right? Some cars do this to a greater extent than others, but little updates. I mean, I just know on our F-150 Lightning, for instance, we just got an update that changed a couple of things on the infotainment. But sometimes these larger software updates that, affect hardware more significantly, you do have to take it to the dealer, and they need to keep the car and plug it in and do the update that way. So
yeah, sometimes it's about how the engine runs. It's about shift points. It's about things that can actually be maybe close to not quite recall level, but things that might have to do with safety and performance.
Right.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't even really have to ask. This should be something that they are staying on top of when you bring the vehicle in. So yeah, they should know to ask you, not the other way around, in my opinion. And I would try to find a dealer that does that for you. Just for example, we buy all our cars really early when they come out. We got our Mustang Mach-E, and it was essentially equipped to have the Blue Cruise advanced, driver assist system in the future. It didn't come with it installed, but we then had to send the car later after about 6 months or so to the dealer and have them do the update, right? That was something that couldn't be done over the air. We had to bring it there. They kept it actually for a couple days to do the update. So totally within reason to be asking for these things.
And Tesla is sending them out to people, they were the kind of the pioneers, and they're sending them out left and right. And more car companies are starting to do that, where you don't even have to bring some of them to the dealer. They're doing it
totally
over the air.
car and brand dependent.
Yeah, it seems like cars are getting more and more sophisticated, more and more software, because the age-old advice is that we used to give out, and maybe we still do, but it's like when your car is out of warranty, you'll spend more money if you go to the dealer, right? So now maybe the paradigm is shifting. Like, you really have to go to the dealer to get these kind of updates if you can't do an over-the-air update. So it's almost like it's shifting, and I guess that's good for the dealer, because one of the reasons when you buy a new car, the dealer says, hey, free lifetime oil changes. They're not just giving you something; they're getting you in their store, because they can't sell you anything else if you're not there.
Hey, while you're here, that old RX is looking kind of. We've got a new model. Would you like to take it for a test drive?
So
while you're waiting.
These fancy new steering wheel controls.
Yeah, how about a steering wheel replacement? My gosh. But no. So you're good. You're gonna if you have to go to the dealer to get these updates, well, you have to go back to the dealer, which I know rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
Well, and depending on the car we're talking about, you could still go to an independent shop that you trust for more of the routine stuff, right? If it's a gas-powered car, your oil changes, things like that, totally. You can handle that without going to the dealer. It's just those independent shops might not be, and likely aren't, equipped to do some of these larger, more significant software updates. Yeah,
some will make those sort of investments, and some also, sometimes you can download. I know with a couple of vehicles from Chrysler, I've at one point had a vehicle and got a USB drive and just plugged it in myself and did it myself. Nice. If you're if you want to play the home version of the game, you can go to National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's website at NHTSA.gov/recalls. And if you type in your car's VIN, it'll give you not just recalls, but you can also click and see technical service bulletins. And this is what they should be seeing on their computer when you go to the dealership to, and to drop off your car. And it'll show you the software updates that you should be getting. So if you kind of want to do it yourself or learn a little more, because I always hate it when you go to bring a car and say, oh yeah, we updated the software, especially for us at CR with our test program cars. We want to know how they changed it, because we're evaluating these cars. And if all of a sudden they've changed something on it, we want to know if it's different. Right. So you get the version notes. So it absolutely ask for software updates and ask any questions you might have to Talking Cars at iCloud.com. So I think that's about all the time we have to learn more about the RX 350 and the RX 350H. We have some information over at cr.org. Send your questions to us, and we'll talk cars again later.